Okay, so 1:35. I guess we should start. So I'm going to turn the recording on, and I guess I should do a formal introduction for you, Matt. But I think people know you a bit.
Seems redundant, yeah.
I'll do a brief one. I mean, it's redundant in the sense for the students, but I guess there's also people from outside. So I will do a brief introduction, but I don't have a written one, so I'm going to go from memory and hope that'll be sufficient. I think I know the general arc of your biography well enough by now.
Sure. So, I can share my screen. I actually have a CV up here too if you want for a little cheat sheet, but it's up to you.
Yeah, if you want to. Let me get the recording started. Beautiful. That's the image of the architect. There you go.
Yeah.
One image of the architect, I should say. There are many images of architects, of course. So, welcome everybody to one more of the global practice sessions. Matt Bolen, who teaches in the course alongside me, is going to be speaking about the work of his practice. And I think Matt's got a recording. Are you still going to do the recording, Matt?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a summary of some of the work, and so Matt will do that, and then also I'm assuming we'll talk a little bit as well live. So this is for those of you who are not part of the professional practice course at the School of Architecture at Waterloo. This is Global Practice Sessions, which is a kind of add-on piece to the course, where we have invited a variety of people, local and global, to speak about essentially their path in architectural practice, coming from a design and built environment background and training, and talking about their interests, their passions, their motivations, and through that, things that the education and design in the built environment can bring to the communities that they wish to be a part of, wish to serve, and to contribute to. And the hope, as I've said a few times, and sorry to bore the class with this, but is that this becomes a way of opening doors and opening ideas and possibilities for all of the students who are watching to know that they can do the same thing. They can create paths that are meaningful for themselves and make contributions through their design and built environment education. So there's been a wonderful set of talks we've had so far. A couple of glitches where the more distant people haven't been able to join in, but we will be able to include recordings of some form for I think all of those people. And so there will be, for the class, they will be there and available as long as you have access to the Teams course channel and through the Global Practice Sessions platform. I don't know exactly what to call it, but the platform that's part of the University of Waterloo School of Architecture website, or could be access to the UW School of Architecture website. And the idea is ultimately to this ongoing project. We'll be doing something like this next year, and there are certainly some gaps in terms of trying to cover a true global practice representation. Some gaps this year. We had a total of 8 speakers, and there will be many more, I hope, in the future. And including a great diversity of people, some of whom weren't represented in this set of sessions here. So anyway, without further belaboring this, I will talk a little bit about Matt Bolen. So Matt is a graduate of the School of Architecture at the University of Waterloo. He is a founder and a co-principal of Edge Architects in Waterloo, Ontario, a small firm that has, I believe, around 10 employees, and is moving fast in terms of progressing in the evolution of a practice. And it's been a pleasure and a privilege for me to watch and see, as Matt, from the time that Matt formed the practice, to see how well that they're doing and the variety of things that they are engaged in. Some of it he's going to talk about today. And Matt has also been teaching with me in this course. And in fact, Matt was teaching in the professional practice course before I got involved with another person who was previously teaching it. So he's even longer in the tooth in terms of than I am. But we've had a great time working together, and hopefully we're making a course that for all of our students is exciting, informative, and not the drudgery that sometimes people feel that pro practice is. So that was our goal when we started to revamp the course, was to make it into something that people would enjoy and would be really meaningful, as well as very informative in terms of all of the regulatory and jurisdictional frameworks that are critical part of professional practice. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt, and you can take it away. And thanks. Oh, and one more thing I should say. Matt also encouraged me in this series for the class. He said, "Well, John, you should do a talk too." And I had fully intended to, and I want to, because I have lots of things that I'd like to share. But I have to say, to be perfectly honest, the idea came up as we started the course, and my role is more of a curator than a presenter most of the time in the course, and so I was intending to do that, but to be perfectly honest, the course is incredibly time-consuming, all day, every day, as well as late into the evenings. And as the students in the class know, I sometimes send out emails at 1 in the morning, so I haven't had time to put something together that I would be satisfied presenting. So I will at some point, and I'm sorry that I couldn't do that for this course, because I would love to have shared with you some of the things that I care about. But some of you know some of those things. Anyway, so I'll turn it over to you, Matt, and thanks for doing.
Well, yeah, I got to jump in now because you just stole my intro. That's what I was exactly going to start with, is the fact that absolutely, I think that's a glaring missing piece of the global practice in this case, is that it was your brainchild to bring it to fruition, and I think it's been really amazing. Just that amazing sample size you have of all these different, whether they be specifically UW grads or not, just this wealth of people around the globe that are working and practicing, and to be able to pull that in. But specifically for yourself, who has such a layered and interesting, dynamic of professional practice in all these variety of ways, obviously including what we all primarily know you for, which is in the educational side and your professorship, but a lot of the other interesting things you're doing, I would have loved to have seen it. So if not this year, then next year we need to make sure that that's the volume 2 stamp that you put on it. But I'll carry the torch for the two of us here today. In terms of time spent preparing, I'm going to preface it by saying I don't have a very slick slideshow or anything like that. Obviously, I've got my CV up here, which I'm going to take down very soon, because I definitely don't want to make this about me personally at all. But I guess I want to start out by saying that I have been involved, and even in this particular CV, used for marketing purposes by the firm, and or proposals or things like that, it does actually mention that I've been adjuncting particularly in this course, professional practice course, since 2015. But as John mentioned, before it was transitioned into this block course format, I actually did help out with the professional practice in after masters. And you can see that there wasn't a whole lot of time, between finishing my master's degree and then the time when I did get involved in the course. So I feel as though although obviously there's a very wide background of all of you, I'm sure, in terms of where you came from, but if nothing else, I think some value that I could add to this particular course on professional practice is the fact that I have sat in your shoes not that long ago. It's the time is growing there, but not that long ago. The program as it was when I was taking it is, I think, in many respects similar to the one that you've gone through. The licensure process that I went through in the years 2010, 2011, 2012, again, will be similar to what you're likely to face and work through. So that's, I think, an interesting context that I bring. I've worked, as you can see, at a firm from 2009 to 2015 called ABA, and that firm actually went through some really significant growth. And I came in as the total junior person on the totem pole, and was able to work my way up, become licensed, as the firm grew from 7 people to over 30 by the time I left. So that experience itself, as an employee moving up through there, was really interesting. As I was there, I was near the end of my time there, offered ownership, and that whole process of what goes into that, of taking on some sort of ownership stake in someone else's or another entity. That was a really interesting thing I got exposure to. then I decided to take that leap and scratch my entrepreneurial itch by starting my own firm on my own, which, a lot goes into that, a lot of stress. And, but, did that and was able to, go off on that path. And then even through that process, very shortly after, realized I had some limitations and some blind spots, and brought on actually a classmate of mine, Michael Trussell, who joined on. And that partnership has been something that has been really critically important. So understanding those dynamics is something that I have experience with. We actually then ended up bringing on and essentially merging with another company. It was a company that existed of primarily contract drafting and 3D scan measuring. We went through that process of merging two companies together and what that looked like. Took on another partner who was the owner of that company. That ran its course for a couple of years, and then he decided to move on and leave. So we transitioned that way. And then now we're back. Michael and I have again, as John mentioned, Edge Architects. Say we're just over 10 person. We're going to be 12, I guess, with a new hire here starting next month. And so definitely in the small to mid-size firm bracket. And it has just been a really interesting career path for me. But particularly what I think is interesting about it and applicable to this course is there's nothing saying that any one of you needs to do more than one of those experiences, because everyone's objectives and goals are always different, and life circumstance and where they're working in the world, all these things do factor in. But I guess for me, and what I think is probably consistent with most of the people we've heard from in these global practice talks, is setting goals and objectives for yourself in your own career is really critically important. And setting a direction will, although there are many things that are out of your control, and I've experience with this even now being in an ownership position. It's amazing to me how there's still things that are out of my control, whether it be a client's decision to move forward with a project, or macroeconomics of global pandemics. There's a lot that's always going to be out of your control. But if within yourself and within your team or organization that you're a part of professionally, if you can establish goals, and they can even be ambitious goals and objectives for yourself, it really lays the tracks for a path you can take. And what will inevitably happen, as it did in my case, is the path isn't without twists and turns, but having a path, having a goal out in the distance, allows you to have a really good set of tools to be able to analyze where you're at in your career and whether you're in the right place. And in some cases, many people will find themselves, even through going through something as simple as trying to gather all your hours required for professional licensure. That process is difficult, and frankly, you aren't always going to get it at one firm. You might not be able to be given that breadth of experience at one place, and you might need to strategically transition. I was very fortunate that I happened to enter into a firm at a time where the firm's portfolio was evolving, and the firm was growing, and so I was afforded many opportunities. But many of my colleagues were not, and either because they wanted to, or because they were essentially in some way forced to, had to go and work multiple places in order to obtain the experience they need. So really, what I want to do is give you that bit of background. For anyone in the class, I've really enjoyed my time over the last almost 10 years now being involved in this professional practice course, because it gives me a connection back to the school, which is important, but it also allows me to start building, to continue building relationships with young, inspiring, what I find inspiring architects like yourselves. And if there's anything I can do to give any direction or guidance, it's been a really great process to see students that sat in your chairs even over the last 5 or 6 years that have gone on and started firms and started doing all these different things, or just risen through the ranks at their respective places of work. So if there's anything that, as a takeaway, I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about now Edge Architects, and some of the things we're doing, and the objectives and goals that our firm has that we've clearly put in place. But if there's anything about any parts of my background that interest you, or if you want to ask questions or anything like that, I'd be more than happy to chat, and either over email or phone or what have you. Probably the last thing in terms of, again, connecting back in terms of justifying my existence here in the course and today, I always found that when I was going through my education, both undergrad and master's at the School of Architecture in Waterloo, it was very inspiring to hear about all the people working all around the world and all the opportunities that were out there for us globally or even in the GTA. But you didn't often see a lot of people or have much exposure to many of the architectural professionals that were working right in the backyard of the School of Architecture. When I started, the school was in Waterloo on campus, and then when we moved to Cambridge, that was, I think, third or fourth year for me. And again, you didn't get a lot of exposure to the actual practices and the architects that were working in this region. And so I'm trying to hopefully help that a bit and let some of you see that, yes, there is architecture and design and all these professional aspects happening right here in your own backyard. And, some of the buildings, hopefully, that we're even going to look at, are things that you can actually go and see. Same way, of course, you could do the same thing in Toronto, but having it right here, I think, for me, there's a certain aspect of inspiring and connecting it to practicality and reality that I think goes with that. So hopefully I've, again, justified my role here as required. Just going to take off. Couple things on my experience. It is varied as well. I did some things, including got licensed as a home energy auditor back when there was a grant program for that. Worked growing up, had a family member with a construction, small contracting company, was able to work there, both in high school as well as took some time off between master's and undergrad to get a bit of a practical experience there. And another thing that for me was really important that I think has served me well is through the co-op program, which Camille talked about yesterday, and how amazing of a thing that is for us and as a resource it is, both between the co-op program and the Rome program. Was able to travel, worked in New Zealand, also worked in Chicago, Toronto, and then had a couple local co-op positions. And one of the specific things, again, in terms of my objectives for my co-op was I wanted to understand all the different scales of firms that were out there. And so when we go back to the experience survey we did on the first day, that was some of those questions we asked. We're trying to get you thinking about those things, because being able to experience and understand what's it like, as Camille was saying, what's it like working in a big multinational firm versus maybe more of a firm that's centralized in one particular region and is smaller, down to the scale of very small or a practice. Like Natasha mentioned, where it's a husband and wife. All of those sorts of things. And understanding and what goes into that will help you crystallize your own objectives for what you're looking for in your life, both personally and professionally. So, all right. So I'm just going to pull up again. You'll see in terms of preparation here. This is just our website, full disclosure, that I'm gonna scroll through. And in terms of Edge Architects, one thing, our name, and this goes back to business planning and choosing your brand and choosing your name. Our name evolved quite organically from the company we merged with was actually called Edge. And so when looking, the original name of the first firm I started was very creative, Bolen Architecture. And then Michael and I switched it to Bolen Trussell Architecture. And then when we did this large merge, we were looking for something that was going to be a little bit shorter and consistent, but not necessarily lose all the, at least local brand and relationship recognition we had. So we chose Edge Architects. And ultimately, naming is always going to be a challenging thing, particularly when it comes to architecture firms. I find, there's some really, obviously, a lot of names out there. And as some of you may know, naming of an architecture firm used to necessitate that you used your surname. or your full name in your naming through licensure at the OA. It was required; it had to be that way. Obviously, it's not that way anymore. And obviously now we see lots of really interesting and creative names for architecture. Super Cool comes to mind, and a few others. But for us, we ended up settling on this really because we had the origins of that in our heritage of merging with the drafting company named Edgewood. But also one of our primary things that we were going to look to pursue was innovation in architecture. And over the course of the careers that Mike and I had up to that point, we realized we had done a lot of more conventionally minded things. I had more of a background in the private sector. Mike's was heavily skewed towards the public sector. So we knew we had that good variation of experience, but we also knew that conventional construction is done the way it is in a lot of cases for good reason, because these are big investments and people don't want to take risks on doing things in new or different ways. But yet we found ourselves as designers, as architects, we took that responsibility on ourselves to say, we need to pursue innovation. We need to look for opportunities to bring that to the market, both primarily locally, so that we can see it here and then be inspired. We can take examples from other places and bring it here. We wanted to see it in our own backyard, some type of innovation. And just by establishing, again, that target, it has created these opportunities for us that have revealed themselves to us. One interesting one is this project here, which is obviously a large master plan site. I had worked on some of the residential condo towers at my old place of work, but this particular office building here actually came to me in the first year that I started my firm, and it wasn't nearly the same scale of a project when it first came to me through the developer client. And the initial stages, this little section here that hopefully you can see my mouse scrolling over, that strip of the site, the developer of the project had just acquired that one little parcel, and they had heard me in previous and in conversations we'd had talking about mass timber. And so then, and I had obviously an interest in it, and had done some research on it and done some design projects that tried to contemplate using it. And simply because of that, they gave me the project to work on coming up with a design. Well, lo and behold, then over time they ended up acquiring the rest of the project, which included this existing 3.5 story brick and beam industrial building. And we ended up coming up with this idea of taking the building up and over. Unfortunately, we lost mass timber through the origins and through the design development process because it just wasn't feasible with all of the reinforcing work we had to do within the existing building. But it was an amazing, to me, idea of how sometimes if you can establish those objectives of what you want to be doing, and you can back it up with your work and your passion for those things, that it can create those opportunities. So that was something that was really interesting for us. And the other piece on that too is relationships. And what I've learned over a decade, working both for someone else as well as now, having my own business, is your ability to build and maintain relationships is really critical. And it's not just relationships with clients. Relationships really are these very elaborate things in our industry, and they require, obviously, being able to speak with and network with potential clients out there in the world. But most of the time, I remember, so 5 or 6 years ago, we had a co-op student working with us, and we were driving to a job site, and she said to me, "How do you get work?" And it was a really interesting question that I had never really thought about to that point. And it's not through advertising. It's not through. We don't do a lot of competitive competitions or proposal writing. We've only done a few that where we were successful, and we tend to stay away from them because of the time and investment it requires to go after those. But for us, anyways, where a lot of our work came from was just through referrals, through our network of consultants, of contractors and trades we'd worked with, of other people in the real estate industry, brokers, bankers even, and also a surprising number came from the approvals authority. So the cities where we did work, where we built relationships with planning staff and building staff, and all those things can work back into your favor. They can also work against you, and that's something that we've really tried to focus on maintaining it. And it's not just about always telling all of those people or what they want to hear. It's about really creating relationships that are based on respect and based on integrity. So it's a thing that's continually we're working at and evolving, but we do also pay a lot of attention to it. So those two things, relationship building and then setting our sights on innovation, are really, I would say, the two founding staples or drivers of what we're doing in this practice. So the wooden mass timber office building prototype was something where we were actually able to go after and get funding through Natural Resources Canada for an innovative mass timber office building. And unfortunately, it was supposed to start construction last spring, summer, and got put on hold because spec office buildings in the COVID era aren't really something that people are doing a lot of. But we do hope that when things come back to normal, that we'll be able to move forward with that one. Obviously, the Glovebox office redevelopment that I spoke of is something where they have actually, the entire superstructure is up and they're putting on the skin right now. So it's a really exciting time. If you're ever in downtown Kitchener, this is Victoria Street right here, so it's pretty difficult to miss it. If you're down there, between all the towers are erected now as well and under construction. So it's a really interesting project. This was also a really interesting project just because, again, when you talk about relationships, when I did ultimately leave my old firm, any of my close advisors that I had talked to and about that said, it's going to be really awful because your old boss and the old owner is going to disown you and it's going to become very so you have to prepare yourself for that, which I did prepare myself for that outcome. But it turns out that, again, I have a lot of respect for my old employer, and he was always a mentor to me, and I was very honest with him about my reasons for moving on, and have been very honest and respectful with him ever since about the goings on of my firm and all those sorts of things. And what's been amazing is that we've actually been able to maintain a relationship, a very healthy one, and actually even a working relationship, where on this particular project there's a property line that is shared along this site. Shared streetscaping, there's a lot of overlap, and because we were able to maintain that relationship, this project has been able to be done with two architects on either side very well, and the client's been happy, and there's been a lot of really positive coordination that's taken place there. So that's one. We've got a couple others here. This was a mid-rise apartment building project I worked on very, very early in our firm. It was based on really the first clients that I ever took on myself, who were, again, young developers themselves starting out. So there was a lot of lessons learned on this project, particularly when it came to approvals. This project was looked to get approvals in the middle of a municipal election, and just so everyone's aware, that is a challenging thing to work through because lots of different factors that may not apply in normal times start to creep in. So that's very interesting. This was actually something that Mike, my partner, was involved a lot with the healthcare and health hub and medical center design and that industry. And again, he's got a lot of context in the industry and has been able to build his portfolio and his experience base there, and essentially become a bit of an expert in that field. And in this particular Brain Community Health Hub, which is currently under construction, is one that was actually a competitive bid, but really what we're finding is, in the past, competitive bids for architectural services or consulting services were very difficult to get into, pre-qualified for, and then inevitably win unless you had relevant experience. And because he was able to build some of that experience through the course of his career at another firm, as well as with us, he was able to get that. So that was kind of a fun one for us. Again, this was a medical center that was through the private sector that wasn't competitive bid that helped lead to that one. And so all of these things basically have allowed us to build, and you can see there's a variety of things we're doing. This particular one here, this modular accessory dwelling unit, was a really interesting project that we worked on with a not-for-profit supportive housing provider who I've worked with for a number of years. I did their headquarters in Kitchener at my old firm, one of my first projects of my career. But this particular project, and we've got some videos on it here, was actually pursuing modular design, and we worked with a steel modular fabricator. Actually, I think a few of you were even toured this building after a course with John N. when it was under construction. So I'm not sure. I'm just going to click on this for a second and see. Yeah. Okay. So before, I've got two videos to play. This one, which is a short description of this particular project, and then I also have a presentation from a webinar series that I did about a month ago with a company called Element 5, and we're working on a really interesting project right now. We were just successful. Again, you go into talk about the experience, and you need the chicken and egg. You need the experience to get the projects, and the projects to get the experience. But again, slowly building it up over the time with these relationships, we've been able to do that over the last number of years. And so there's a project we have for a supportive housing project, 4 stories through the Rapid Housing Initiative Fund from the federal government. And it's out of mass timber. And we gave a webinar series on this, essentially this building profile or this typology that we've come up with in collaboration with Element 5, the mass timber fabricator who's got their new facility, state-of-the-art facility out of St. Thomas, and also, local group of design build team consisting of Lou Blamey as a contractor, as well as a number of other consultants and trades. So I've got a video on that describes that a little bit. It's about 25 minutes, and obviously this building on this modular ARU project is 3 minutes. So I want to go through and show those videos to you. But before I do, is there any questions that anyone has at this time about anything I've talked about to date so far? Don't feel obligated to ask questions, but if there is, I'm happy to take a brief moment to chat about it.
I'm watching the chat as well, Matt, and not seeing anything coming in so far.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, no problem. So I'm going to play the video of, I might just reshare my screen though, so that I make sure the audio is currently turned on. And then I'll play the 2 videos. And again, if there's any questions that come up either after either of these videos or that shake loose over the next, I call it 25 minutes, let me know. And otherwise, again, I'm here for the next for the duration of the week, and as well as after this. Please feel free to ever reach out and contact me if anything comes up, or if you have any questions. Okay. Here we go. Share. John, if you can just give me a thumbs up if you can hear the sound once I play this.
Will do. So from Pune, we have, and Pune is working with Adrian Blackwell and I on a modular housing project for tiny homes. So I'm glad to see, Pune, that you're curious about this. And we're working with Z Modular as well, actually. The project is really exciting, but do you think that you have the agency and capacity to introduce affordable housing solutions in developments like the Glovebox?
Affordable solutions. So interesting. You know what? Glovebox is an office building first and foremost. So the typology there wouldn't really accommodate residential. The residential condo towers behind, though, are a really interesting thing when you start introducing the topic of affordable housing, particularly over the last couple of years, and the way it's bubbled to the surface of planning policy and particularly political will is really pushing on the affordability aspects. So what any project, although the approvals for those condo towers, for example, was 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago when that was all happening, versus the projects that are now going through approvals that will be inevitably constructed and occupied in the coming few years, they all have to show how they're creating affordability, either in their own projects, so within one of those towers, how many units are affordable, what does that affordability look like, or there's also a lot of developers looking to say, well, we're not going to put the affordable housing here, we're going to build it somewhere else in partnership with either a supportive housing provider or what have you. So affordability in housing is a massive issue right now, no question. It's something we're looking a lot into. We're approaching it from both, and I think it's important to do this. And this also relates to our forays into any type of innovation, whether it be modular building, affordable housing, mass timber, what have you. For me, I've found what is a really effective tool in tackling it is a full understanding of what's out there. And that means really understanding and actually having experience with the conventional way of doing things. Because what I find is if you're trying to particularly affect change with the ultimate decision makers, who are usually the developers or the clients in some respect, if you can't say to them, well, we've done this before, and we know we have a better way, then it's going to be very hard to get traction, because again, no one's really willing to gamble or take the risks on such large investments. So your question is a really good one, but a really challenging one to answer. I think in design, pure design, we know that there's so many endless opportunities in residential design to do really cool things. What makes things so complex in actuality is that you get into the constructability side of things and the time and the costs that go into that, and then you get into just all the various ownership models, whether it be rental or purchase, and how complex that is. And frankly, that's the thing, whereas architects with our education and background, we tend to not have those financial tools and understandings and understanding of pro formas and all these other factors to be able to affect change there. So the next video that I want to show you hopefully will show at least how our office is trying to do what we can to make good in that space. Yeah. Anything else there?
Matt, I was just curious to know what the square foot area of the little building is, and do you have if you can share it, the cost per square foot of the finished building as a comparison to, say, a stick frame construction conventional on a site?
Yep. So the footprint is a 2-bedroom unit that is in, I want to say it's around 800 square feet. So it was 2 chassis roughly. So I think it was under 800 square feet. It was 2 chassis, I think roughly 12 by 30, call it. So it was in the 750 to 800 square foot in terms of the size. So very, very conventional. I mean, relatively efficient, but very conventional 2-bedroom unit size. Cost per square foot, this was literally the first project off the line at the Kitchener Z Modular facility. So when I met Derek Henderson and met David Warren there, who's also a UW grad, who's VP of design over there, we met them at their facility in Kitchener, and Derek Henderson, the VP operations, was sitting in a camping chair in an empty facility, 250,000 square foot building, and he's just sitting at a card table with a camping chair. So they literally started up the whole facility, and that was the first project that we did with them. So from a cost per square foot, I mean, it is definitely a prototype, and the cost, although everyone involved in the project absorbed a lot of costs, it was definitely an R&D project for all of us, including Z Modular. The costs are really not comparable with stick frame. I mean, stick frame, to do what we did in stick frame, would be a fraction of the cost. It was, this was well over, even with some of the subsidies, probably $300 a square foot. So it wasn't competitive that way. But when we started out to do this prototype, we actually, the intent was this same non-for-profit group who owned that home, and we did it in the backyard, have another property further down the street where we were looking to do a 4-story, 20-unit affordable housing apartment building, and that's where we wanted this prototype to be able to be stacked. And that's really the value to the modular system, was its ability to create those chassis and then stack them over multi-story, multi-res designs. So I don't know, that was the background of that one. It was a really interesting project. To me, it gave me this really fundamental new knowledge of modular, and the challenges. Some of the challenges in terms of when you connect these chassis, it sounds great, but you're like, well, they're finished boxes and you just plug them together and you walk away. But it is actually more complex. And we even had issues with the closeout of the project. When your HVAC unit goes to plug into a duct shaft that's connected into the two chassis, and the airflow through the diffusers that's coming out isn't matching what's coming out of the unit. What do? Do you have to pull everything apart? Because then you're losing all that efficiency. Like things like that I know, although we're not working directly with Z Modular right now, because they've taken a slightly different approach on really formalizing their design of their multi-res buildings. There's a lot of challenges and things to work out there, but projects like this give you that experience and exposure to those to those design issues that you otherwise wouldn't be aware of. So that's why it's exciting. The one thing for me, it doesn't matter what the project is. That video, every job I drive around in this region that's built, I always see the mistakes. I see the things that didn't quite get executed right. I think I'm common in that standpoint for architects. We're always a little masochistic that way, where we just always want to pick away at all the things that didn't get quite done right. At least Mike and I both feel that way for sure. But in some ways, that for me drives me to want to do better, be better, and I think it actually informs our designs and our process moving forward.
Shannon has a comment which I think is very she said, "I like the Dragon's Den reversal. Ask the tough questions, John."
Yeah, great. Well, hey,
come on, Shannon, you've got to have some tough questions, or anybody else. And what Purna added something: how frequently do developers choose to build affordable housing elsewhere? Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and there's a lot to say, but I'll leave it to you to talk about that one.
Yeah, well, and it's you're seeing a lot of it because, again, the political will is driving it. So developers, I've met I've really grown in respect for developers, first and foremost. I will say, when I was in school, I did always have a bit of a entrepreneurial mindset, and for sure, there was certain parts of school, and there is examples of architects who do this, but I thought, I'm just going to become a developer myself, and then I'm my own client. It's easy. Like, how hard could it really be? Natalie, what's the net worth? That's confidential, Natalie, and I'm not looking for any investors right now. So nice try. Good question though. Yeah, so I think back to how frequently do they do it? My point was developers aren't, I have actually grown a lot of respect for developers, and a lot they do is rooted in a lot of experience, a lot of skill, and a lot of risk. I mean, they take on huge amounts of risk to do what they do. So when they're making decisions, they're always based on how do we mitigate risk, and one of the risks they have is how do we get the highest and best yields, and how do we get approvals to get the highest and best yields. Right now, one of the things that drives the city's go no go on approving, you know, zoning applications or various things like that is, are you providing affordability? It's a bit of a gray zone in my opinion right now. There isn't a lot of municipalities out there who have very clear black and white, give us this many affordable, give us this many affordable, just because frankly the definition of affordable is such a broad and gray thing, right? But I will say that almost all of the private developers now that I'm working with, this is on their radar, and they're looking at in most cases other sites to provide affordable housing, and usually in some sort of partnership model with affordable and supportive housing providers. So, which, and again, this, I mean, oftentimes developers get, you know, spun out as the snake oil salesman or the, you know, the greedy whatever. And I found that in a lot of cases, they actually have the same desires to do good work and be altruistic and be community builders that we would as professionals. Not always, but I've tried to align myself with those who do. So I think, and for both the practical business and bottom line driven reasons it's happening, and also because I think a lot of them see the altruistic aspects of it as well. So
an interesting question just occurs to me, Corna, since you and I are working on this project for tiny homes, prefabricated tiny homes. There's a good place for funding for our tiny home villages that we're trying to create is through developers, actually. So we should look into that. In fact, I think that's part of your research piece for an hour, or if it's not, maybe we can make it part of your research piece. We should look and discuss with some developers about whether they can support our project for tiny homes villages in Cambridge. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the one interesting thing for me on the affordability, which is absolutely a target for us right now, and even an innovation target for us, as well as, you know, it has that great, all those great aspects to it, is understanding the full housing continuum. Like CMHC has a good diagram of what that is, and it really goes from, you know, one step off of homelessness, so shelters essentially, and then it gradiates up from there. So supportive housing, you know, seniors housing. There's all these different types of housing needs, and it's quite a broad cross section of all sorts of differentiated users. And so, absolutely, I mean, just the fact that, John, you might know Lot 47, a Better Tent City, that was out in the far end of Kitchener. That building just sold, and that Better Tent City is now it's going to get shut down. So, right there, there's potential need. The project that this video, if we still have time to go through it, the project is that we were successfully awarded this project on, that needs to be occupied by December, complete by December of this year, which is an insane timeline, but we're actually making really good progress towards it. It's one of the reasons why I've unfortunately been a little bit more absent than I'd normally like to be on this course, is I'm in essentially daily meetings on this project. It's really exciting. But for example, the user group on there are single women fleeing dealing with chronic homelessness. So that's a really interesting building user group profile right there, because basically the YW KW group, who's the client on that project, needs to provide these units for their users, but they almost can't be too nice. It's like one of their design criteria is that the units can't be too nice, and we're going, this seems off, but it's because it's meant to be a transitional form of housing where people aren't, it's able to, escape. So it's a very layered, again, aspect, but again, the more you can, what I've found is amazing is over, again, a decade of building these relationships and connections, you can start to tie these things together, and you get involved in projects that maybe you otherwise wouldn't, just because you know or have worked with somebody on something in the past. Perfect example being the wooden office building prototype project that I showed off our website. That was a project that we had essentially worked with the client and brought on Element 5 as our fabrication partner on that project and done various testing and all these sorts of things. That created the relationship with Element 5 in our office that we have now taken and bleeds into this supportive housing solution with them primarily as of ourselves and Element 5 driving that and bringing people in to support us. So it kind of came full circle. Anyways, this is 25 minutes, John. Is that, I don't know what kind of time window I had established here, but
yeah, I think we're fine. I mean, we've got so Larry's going to talk at 3:00, so I think we'll have time to show it and then a brief amount. And I mean,
Sure.
We've had some good questions here, and I like Natalie's questions, everyone. I'm going to come back to address that actually in terms of something at the end before we wrap up.
Hey, if anybody wants to make an offer on purchasing, if the number's right, I'll always go for it. But it's anyways, okay. I'll play this one here, and again, happy to. If we run out of time too for questions, we can always. I'll be around tomorrow. So yeah. Okay. There we go. Yeah.
All right, let's get started. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. We're very happy to be here with you to present this session on affordable housing and our solution. We ask that you please hold your questions till the end of the session. We want to make sure that we can get through the materials so that we're able to present the session in its entirety. If you're worried about forgetting your question midway, I encourage you to use the question and answer button at the bottom. If you type in your question there, we'll be able to call that up at the end of the session and we can moderate the questions from there. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Patrick Chouinard, the founder of Element 5, to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Patrick Chouinard. I'm the founder of Element 5. Element 5 is a modular building manufacturer that uses wood primarily, and motivated largely by the positive contribution that we're able to make to communities, to the environment, and future generations. I'm very pleased to be joined by Matt Bolen. Matt is one of the founding partners of Edge Architects, also one of the leading proponents of modular construction using wood, and also motivated by contributions to the communities. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background about what's happening in the industry. We're in the midst of a revolution in the construction industry. It's a revolution that began in Europe about 30 years ago, and it's now well upon the shores of North America. It's a revolution that's characterized by buildings that are being manufactured off-site and shipped to site where they are assembled rather than being constructed in the traditional sense. This particular building, this is the Brock Common Student Residence at the University of British Columbia, and it's reflective of the future of construction. It's built on a concrete podium upon which stand the glulam columns that you see on the left-hand side, and on top of the glulam columns sit these massive CLT panels. They're called cross-laminated timber. So essentially you have a glulam column, a CLT floor slab, more columns, more slabs. This building is 18 stories tall, and what's also unique about this particular building is the use of prefabricated exterior wall panels. So the panels that you see on the outside of the building, they're prefabricated in a factory, so they come with the structure of the panel, the windows and the doors, and the cladding. And this particular building, standing at 18 stories, was rendered completely weather-tight in 9.5 weeks. And what we've created for the affordable housing solution, or for the affordable housing crisis in the Ontario marketplace, is a similar type of building, but just of smaller scale. Next slide, please. So the wave of the use of these materials landed on the shores of British Columbia about 10 years ago and has made its way all across the country. And Ontario is, there's been a huge uptake in the use of prefabricated mass timber buildings in the Ontario space. And what you're seeing here are just a small selection of the buildings that are in various stages of design, development, and construction. So Starting at the top left-hand corner, that's Eastern Avenue. It's one of the first mass timber buildings to be constructed in Toronto since the 1920s. George Brown is building a 10-story building. The University of Toronto is building a 14-story building. Centennial College is building a 16-story building, and on and on. The one at the bottom right-hand corner is Element 5's largest project to date. It's about an 80,000 square foot building for the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, and we'll be delivering that to site in just about 6 weeks. Next slide, please. So why all the interest in mass timber? There's really, there's something in this for everyone. There's really nothing negative about the mass timber space. So for the owner developer, the conversation is generally about higher return on investment. So in mass timber, we can construct these buildings cheaper, we can construct them faster, more predictably, and generally people are willing to pay a premium to be in these beautiful buildings on the inside, so hence a higher return on investment for the owner developer. For the environmentalist, the concrete and steel industries are responsible for about 12 to 14% of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today. And when you're building with wood, what you're doing is you're leveraging our forest's natural ability to absorb carbon dioxide and store the remaining amounts of carbon in ever increasing amounts of wood. And if you manage your forest well, as we do here in Canada, you selectively harvest those components and you use wood in order to build things. In the case of buildings, instead of the concrete and steel industries, they're spewing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. You've created a systematic way of removing it from the atmosphere and storing it in the form of these beautiful buildings. And lastly, the benefit for communities or the inhabitants of these buildings. Studies are showing that there are health benefits associated with living and working in environments in which we're exposed to natural elements. And so by exposing wood elements in these structures, we're creating these healthier environments. Next slide. So because the mass timber industry is offering lower cost buildings, faster to construct, and creating these healthier environments, we felt that maybe the mass timber industry has a possible solution to the affordable housing crisis. And in almost every major city in North America, they're all struggling with affordable housing issues. And so what we did, Matt and I got together, and Matt particularly helped put a team together that included himself as architect, engineers, cost consultants, code consultants, envelope consultants. So we put this big group of people with like-minded individuals, and we said, well, how can we create a more sustainable and affordable solution, for the Ontario marketplace? And this is what we've come up with. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Matt to explain the solution that we've come up with.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. I can't actually see anyone else on this call. Apparently, we have upwards of 40 people, so it's great to have such a big group, an interested group. So we're very happy to be here today, and very grateful to Element 5 and Sarah and Patrick for setting this up. So as I'll just jump right in, as Patrick was saying, this initiative we have of this new affordable housing solution. We're very excited about, and to that extent, we've actually been successful in locking up the project that we're moving ahead with. I should state that I've been working with in various levels, not-for-profits and community housing groups and supportive housing organizations throughout this region that we're in, Regional Waterloo, for the better part of a decade. And the one thing that continually keeps coming up in that work is the need for inclusivity. And that's something that we see now spreading over into the affordable housing. You see it at municipal levels with inclusive zoning and all of these things. It's really important to us that affordable or supportive housing or attainable housing isn't stigmatized and shoved off into the corners of our society, but it's something that we can, actually celebrate together and make it inclusive. And so that was one of our that's one of our first driving goals. That's definitely, as Patrick mentioned, something that they're aspiring to with their business. And so that was a bit of a departure point. And as some of you probably are well aware, the federal government, all levels of government, but particularly the federal government back this fall came out with their Rapid Housing Innovation Funding, which is almost $1 billion nationally, that was going to be deployed out through municipalities and then to individual organizations to support the rapid construction and or providing of affordable housing. And so that caught our attention, and we started working with and talking to various groups. And one thing though that we realized is that although this was this amazing investment and opportunity, there was also some risks. And the risks were if all we were going to focus on in bringing that housing to market was the reduced cost and the accelerated assembly, the rapid housing having, this funding tied to being able to deliver occupancy within 12 months, there was a risk. And what we were seeing out of some of the other solutions was that this stuff might not be the best quality living environments and may over time become stigmatized further. And so we wanted to, on our side, come up with something that could meet all the objectives, but also could contribute to healthy and sustainable environments for occupants, regardless of who those occupants were. So that was basically our departure point. And then we started looking at the process and how can we make our process with this system more efficient, and where do, particularly with the mass timber system that Patrick is describing, how can it specifically create some of these advantages, both in terms of budget, efficiency, fast tracking, what have you. So this is the process that we went through, which isn't altogether that different from what you see in conventional development projects, with your planning approvals and site work and foundations. However, if you look at points 4 and 5, where you talk about the superstructure and your roof and wall panelized, and that panelized prefabricated off-site system, that's really the opportunity that we have here. The rapid housing investment that's made at the federal level, it wasn't purely just based on finished boxes. It was defined in a way that actually allows for prefabrication of components that can then be assembled on site. So that gave us this opportunity, using Element 5 and their new facility that Patrick's going to talk about in St. Thomas, as this real relevant solution that was going to be successful. So again, that's what we have started working with. As we were working through it, we realized there's a lot of different advantages to using this system that we wanted to take advantage of and communicate. So the durability and security side, oftentimes, whether it be affordable housing or supportive housing, there's wear and tear and durability, long-term durability, things that people are concerned about. And this product, the dense nature of both the floor and the wall and the structural systems, obviously very durable, very and able to take that sort of tolerance. The other is the rapid assembly. One thing that we'll do that I'll show you in a couple of slides on the constructability side is the ability to erect this quickly, erect that superstructure up and then enclose it as quickly as possible is really essential to the fast-tracked nature. It also creates cost savings through construction, but the fast-tracking is really essential to that. So one thing we've done is, in a lot of our conventional projects that do use non-combustible building, such as cast-in-place concrete or particularly precast concrete, there was a way we basically took the same logic that we use when we were laying out precast concrete or total precast type building structures, and we tried to design this mass timber in a way that could be compared apples to apples with that system in terms of the dimensions and how those things are laid out. And as we'll see in some of our further slides, that rapid assembly is actually assisted by the mass timber product, simply in the fact that a typical precast slab is about 4 feet wide versus what Element 5 is able to do at their facility and transport is about 3 times that width by the same length. So it really creates this efficiency in a third of the number of picks and drops on every site, which helps speed up construction significantly. So again, that ties in again with the modular and those prefabricated components. And as again we go on, there's other advantages in terms of the fire performance. It's important that when we're talking about mass timber, I think most people are aware, but this mass timber and its dense nature and its ability to char, it creates really strong fire ratings that are proven and tested and understood. We have a lot of conversations, not just with our trades and engineering partners, but with municipalities and building officials, and those values and that understanding is out there now. Acoustics the same way. Again, we have this great team of both product suppliers and engineers and consultants who work with us on all of our testing of assemblies to make sure that we're providing, particularly in the multi-residential space, those required sound transmission class ratings that are needed and part of building code. Building performance and energy efficiency. And again, as Patrick alluded to, this is a product that just naturally is in and of itself. By using this carbon sink, it's a way that is naturally very sustainable, but it also has other benefits. The thermal conductivity of the product, it really helps limit thermal bridging. Also, the way that you'll see in terms of our wall cladding panels, all the insulation and thermal protection and moisture protection is on the outside of the product, which really helps in terms of how you assemble the thing and the overall performance, and again, various other sustainable benefits of the system. So again, as I was saying, we want to get into when we were looking at the overall constructability, it really broke down for us into three major subheadings. So there's the superstructure itself. So you can think of the walls and the floors and how those go up and how quickly they go up. Then you have these circulation elements, so the stairs and the elevators that are a key part of moving people through the building. And then finally, the cladding and the envelope on the outside. So you can see here from this diagram that we'll go through how that works. One thing we've looked to do is, again, for that speed of erection, is to pair and pull out these circulation elements outside of the main superstructure of the building. And that creates a lot of different advantages in terms of laying the buildings out on the sites where they are. There usually tends to be a natural way that those fit. But I mean, it should be noted too that this system is very flexible to be used in different ways on different sites and for different scales of buildings. So again, going into that flexible structural layout, you can see what we worked with, again, going back and comparing it to other systems and our experience in laying out efficient multi-residential buildings, is we are working with basically 3 times the width of a typical precast plank at 3.5 meters versus 1.2. And then we use the same range of a length of a panel in that sort of 11.5 to 12.5 meter length. The one big advantage to this system is typically in non-combustible bearing, you'd only bear on the end of the panels, but the mass timber system, whether you're using bearing shear walls, CLT walls, or glulam columns, having multiple points of bearing throughout a single panel actually is advantageous, can be a good thing, and it allows you to minimize your thickness of your product and therefore save volume and save costs. So we've actually deployed that here, and you can imagine in a multi-residential layout where you have all of these different demising walls and partition walls, it naturally sets up an opportunity to create multiple points of bearing. And so that's one thing we've been able to use with a lot of success. We've shown down here, not to get into too technical on anything, but we've looked at different assemblies that we're now applying to how we can achieve our sound ratings throughout these spaces using this very simplified structural system. And the one thing you'll notice is that in most cases we're trying to expose the underside of this system to get that aesthetic quality and warmth into these spaces. So again, vertical circulation, this is something through the maximum panel length that Allen 5 can produce right now is 16 meters, and on a 4-story multi-res building, that actually allows us to stand these panels end for end. So you can again imagine the efficiency of being able to drop these things in vertically. It can create huge efficiencies. Once we get into 5 and 6 stories for some of our multi-res and our mid-rise densities and affordable housing, obviously then we get into some more challenges with our building code and where they're looking for additional fire protection and non-combustibility. There's ways we can do that with this system, or again, we've also looked at and have designed out scenarios with Element 5 where we've actually used a non-combustible concrete core vertical circulation paired with the superstructure of the units themselves in the mass timber, and that works as well in that side of a hybridized approach. Finally, one of the last things, and this is again, as Patrick mentioned on the Brock Commons projects, these prefabricated wall systems where you can get them delivered to site and get that building sealed up that much quicker. This is the clip system, which is actually an Element 5 system, state of the art for them, where they're using an actual CLT backing panel that can clip very efficiently onto this structure, and then it comes to site with at least the insulation layer in terms of some sort of rigid insulation, wood fiber or other, getting a really high R value all on the outside of the building, which again, from a thermal performance is ideal. Water thermal vapor barrier, air barriers, all applied along with some strapping. And then we have the choice, again, depending on the approvals authority or the design, whether our finished product, windows and actual rain screen gets applied onto the actual site in situ, or in some cases we're looking at solutions where we actually do that in the plant as well, and then have even that much more of a fast track solution once you get on site. So finally here on this piece, I just wanted to show, this was actually a unit we've done recently. It was for a very particular use, and then we did a rendering to go along with it. So you can start to see some of the value and the aesthetic quality that these spaces are going to take on. But if you'll notice, this unit itself is actually very small and tiny. This was done for a user who has some very specific requirements on, they needed to have a bedroom that would have natural light, but they also wanted a very small, like under 400 square foot unit, which was a big challenge. And typically in the market, when you see those types of units, they're long and narrow. They have some sort of a Murphy bed or some sort of, studio type layout and feel to them. So we were pretty excited about this layout, and that we were able to create this the space requirements that they required, but also in a very compact unit design. And the great thing, and why we're so excited about it, is the ability to swell this out and have it work for other users and other affordable housing providers based on their given requirements or their site restraints. That's a possibility. But not only that, you can also imagine, as you can see in the rendering, this being able to be scaled up and swelled out for even market housing. And that's where we can really start to push this idea of inclusive living, but yet very efficient and solutions for affordable housing. So again, just the last on the why wood. I mean, there's so many different reasons why it makes sense, and we want to keep using it and pushing it. Some of the keys are, it's healthy and sustainable. With the fact, in the case of Element 5 here now, we have locally sourced and produced, energy efficiency, strong, safe, affordable, adaptable, and obviously accessible. Everyone understands and appreciates it that way. And just to that point too, one great thing that we do as part of this, as a resource both with Element 5 and through Wood Council of Canada, is an ability to actually track the actual carbon that we're going to be sequestering in our buildings. So this was again an example of a project that we recently were just successful in bidding for and winning the bid on. That's going to be having to be occupied in the next 12 months. So lots of work to be done, but we're very excited about it. Anyways, this came from that. So you're talking about 54 cars off the road. Those sorts of metrics, although it sometimes can be a bit abstract, in this case, we think it's pretty exciting, and particularly when you start to take these values and compare them to other options that are out there now, or more conventional options, as Patrick was saying, with concrete being and steel production being such a large driver of carbon emissions, the gap between these two options could really be felt. So we're again excited about that opportunity. So maybe I'll pass it over to Patrick to carry on.
Thanks, Matt. So just a little bit of information about Element 5. We were founded in late 2015, and we had our first plant, which is located in Quebec, about an hour due east of Ottawa. And over the last 3 years, we produced about 40 projects so far, for small to medium-sized projects, but built a good relationship for us and did some wonderful projects. We always had our sights set on a larger opportunity, and we've been working for a number of years to build a new facility in St. Thomas, Ontario, and you'll see obviously a few photographs of that plant there. It is in fact the most fully automated mass timber manufacturing plant in the world, which we're very proud of. 137,000 square feet. We have a capacity to produce 45,000 cubic meters of CLT and 5,000 cubic meters of Bolen. Just to put that in perspective, we have the capacity to produce about 20-story buildings per year, so quite significant capability, and very pleased that all of the wood that we're providing in our buildings is sourced from Ontario Forest. Next slide, please. So element 5 core values. So fabrication excellence. I've just touched upon that. Our commitment to sustainability. So we take pride in all of our wood coming from Ontario Forest. We are a turnkey professional service provider, so we continue to work with architects and engineers and what have you in the industry to help empower the industry. But collectively, we provide a full suite of services, including design, consulting, costing, engineering, fabrication, and assembly services. So typically, we end up providing the assembly of the structures which we are contracted to supply. And we believe in constant innovation. And as I may have indicated, the plant that we built in St. Thomas, Ontario, in Ripon, Ontario, we've converted into strictly an innovation center where we do constant research development and testing to introduce new products into the marketplace. Next slide. Back to you, Matt.
Back to me. Yeah, so this is, I think one of the exciting things for us in this work we've been doing with Element 5 and some of our other partners is just how it happens over time. It's not, just drop in your lap sort of thing. And it's always just about, as we both, Patrick and I think in our work and in our team's work, been doing over time. And so for us, we have a lot of these same drivers that inspire us and that keep our interest: sustainable design, innovative construction, mass timber, high performance, and modular particularly. And in this case, that modular connection and some of the projects that we were doing that in the past have all sort of rolled together and created this really great opportunity. And again, I keep referring to the fact that we are very excited about where we think we can take this and just how applicable and how much it's going to be, I think, a needed solution, not just in affordable housing, but even in that missing middle of mid-rise multi-residential construction. So I'm looking forward to the future.
That's a great way to end your talk, Matt. Looking forward to the future.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah.
So we've got a few minutes. I've just been over to the other, I will post here. I can get that. So we're going to move over to the other call with Larry Smith in a minute. But if anybody wants to ask any questions of Matt, we can do that now before we go. Or if you want to take a break for a few minutes, we're due with Larry at 3 o'clock. And let me just get that. I'll just get that posted in the chat so that everybody knows, and I'll also send it out on Learn as well, or on the Teams page.
Well, while we're waiting for that too, just in the last couple of minutes. So quiz 4 will be going out today, and you will have that back first thing in the morning so that we can roll that into exam prep tomorrow morning, right? And you should have quiz 3 back shortly. So definitely today.
Okay, so that everybody there, Larry Smith talk and Teams call for the afternoon. Click here to join the meeting. And I just wanted to give a little bit of a humorous reply to Natalie, who asked what the value of your company was, Matt. And our company, oh, wait a minute, I'm in the wrong, sorry. I just put it into the wrong call. I'm going to put it into this call.
I think I know where this is going.
Let's talk. Okay, So there on this one, I'll send it out on Teams in a minute. So yeah, just in terms of the value. So my wife, Melina Jansen, and I have a firm together, and these days it's mainly me because I'm spending so much time on things like this course and on design build. But I would say that we are a net zero company, and that means net zero in terms of the buildings we build and net zero in terms of the worth. So there you go.
Or the other is the other good one that I've used in the past is we're a not-for-profit company, but not because we want to be.
Yeah, there's a great term for that. A unintentional not-for-profit. Yeah.
One good question here. What is it like starting a working relationship with your classmate and former friend? Did you stay friends? Really interesting question, and that is something. Personality mix here is really important. So Mike and I actually weren't in the same undergrad class. We did our masters together, and actually did a couple special projects in masters together. We also, when we were both working at different firms, studied for our exact exams together, and that went really well. So in some ways, we had all these trial runs of working together that seemed to work, but more importantly, for us anyways, and this is always different, and the dynamics of this are challenging, but we're both married to teachers, we both have 3 kids. Like, there's all these things that just synced up in terms of our priorities, and that worked out well. But I think more importantly, if you were to meet both of us, or for any of you that happen to know Mike maybe, our personalities are quite a bit different, but I think we would both argue pretty complementary. And as I said, when I started on my own, there was certain things, limitations that I had. I tend to really get excited about big ideas and talk about them, as you may have gathered even from today's talk. And Mike is just as excited and inspired. And in particular, Mike is even someone who has known he wanted to be an architect since he was a little kid, like never deferred. But that said, he tends to be very grounded and very process driven, which is obviously really important. So I think in some ways he harnesses me back, and maybe I push him a little bit further on some of the big ideas and things we've done. So it's very complementary, and actually, so to your point, if anything, I think it's probably brought us much closer, and not to say that we were best friends going into it, but it's been good. It's been a really good thing, and I particularly when we brought in another partner and then started to understand those partner dynamics, it made us even more appreciative of the fact of what we have and the importance of maintaining it. I mean, it's a partner relationship in a business is not that much different than any intense, well, and I'm sure John can speak to this as well, and maybe he can in his next year's volume, but because he's got the double whammy of a spouse and a business partner all wrapped into one. But there's a lot of similarities, I would say, with your business partner and your life partner, I'll call it. So no, it's very fortunate that way.
I would concur with that, and I think the best advice I would have is humility and tolerance and acceptance. There's always lots of need for that, and it makes for a good partnership.
Yeah, my favorite thing with Mike is, particularly when we started, it was just him and I, so we got to really work on our team dynamics together first before we started introducing more people. And the classic thing that I've said to him, honestly, over the last 5 years, it usually happens once or twice a year. I'll look at him and I'll say, hey, are you okay right now? Like, you look like you're upset. And his constant response to me is, no, that's just my face. And so, humor is a great tool too. But, anyway.
Okay, well, that's great. And I mean, if there's more chat, we can do it after Larry's talk as well. Sure. Larry's talk we won't run out the whole time, but for today. So if we need to, and then there's also tomorrow. We have a session tomorrow morning, which is the exam kind of prep workshop thing, where we'll be talking about the exam, but we can also talk about other things too. So let's shift over there now. I hope everybody's got all the connections. I put it in 3 places, so I think that should do it. And we'll
don't skip Larry. Don't skip Larry.
Yeah, don't skip Larry. It's really worth it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thanks.